9. Ignition sequence.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
1, 0, and liftoff.
Mission complete, Houston. After serving the world for over 30 years, the space shuttle's earned its place in history and it's come to a final stop.
115 cardinals charged with electing the next pope are now on a lunch break. Now, earlier they began day 2 of their conclave. A short time ago, black smoke poured out of the chimney on the roof of the Sistine Chapel, a sign that the cardinals did not reach consensus on the church's new leader during their morning session. In about 3 hours' time, they will return to the chapel to resume voting. Now, a 2/3 majority of votes is required to confirm the new pope. Let's go live now to Dan Rivers, who is outside the Quirinale Palace in Rome. And Dan, set the scene for us.
Well, Christy, you're probably pretty used to seeing the sights of St. Peter's Basilica, but actually I'm on the other side of the city. Welcome to the Quirinale. This is the highest of the 7 hills of Rome. It's famous, of course, for this building here. This is the official residence of the President of the Italian Republic, but you might not know this actually used to be a residence also of the popes back in history. Pope Gregory XIII back in 1383 used this as a summer residence, and more recently it was actually used for 5 different conclaves between 1774 and 1846. There you had the same system of smoke that we've been reporting on down there. They will wait for the white smoke, people will be gathered, rather than crowds gathering here. The people on the other side of the city would keep an eye out, and if they saw the white smoke, they'd fire a cannon to let the entire city know that a new pope had been elected. We're going to give you a tour throughout the day, hopefully, if the technology works for us, of the various different sites around Rome that are connected with the pope. Jimena Amorales, you are an architectural historian, an expert on these
And unfortunately, just after Dan said the technology was not working out for them just then, but as Dan was setting the scene for us, was describing Quirinale Palace there outside the Vatican as a site where conclaves of the past used to take place. And we'll try to fix that connection for you so we can hear more from that architectural historian. Now, the conclave is taking place in the Sistine Chapel beneath some of the world's finest works of art. And yes, the 115 cardinals eligible to vote are casting their ballots before Michelangelo's depiction of Christ delivering the Last Judgment scene in this image. Now, this enormous fresco on the altar wall of the chapel took the Renaissance master some 4 years to complete, nearly 500 years ago. And the election of a pope has for centuries been shrouded in religious mystery and secrecy. But in this modern age, the process seems more like a political campaign with high stakes for the future of the Catholic Church. Jim Bitterman has more.
Since the very first conclave, the explanation has always been the same. As the cardinals gather behind locked doors, they try their best to discern the will of the Holy Spirit for guidance that will help them make the right choice to lead the worldwide church. But seldom have worldly concerns weighed so heavily on cardinals' minds. As never before, the cardinals themselves say that the church's international and external problems will play a significant role in the way they vote for pope. On the sex abuse scandals, for instance, victims groups have published lists of candidates who have good and bad track records. The Vatican spokesman says that will have no impact on the vote.
We are well aware of the positions of SNAP and the information that you've seen in the press, but it really isn't up to SNAP, that organization, to determine who should participate or not in the conclave.
But papal watchers say they can't believe the voting cardinals would not consider a candidate's background on the sex abuse issue.
They will not go for a character who is not, should I call it, squeaky clean?
And in interviews over the 2 weeks since Benedict XVI stepped down, the cardinals have been uncharacteristically direct about what it will take to be the next pope. For some, he has to be a good manager who can clean up what many consider long-festering problems of Vatican governance. More transparency in church finances, fewer leaks and scandals at the Holy See. For others, a top priority will be finding someone who can stop the church's decline in the Western world, attract more priests, bring more masses to the masses.
And they're looking for somebody who can be an evangelizer, the secular word for which is a salesman. You know, somebody who can effectively make the pitch for Catholicism in the postmodern marketplace.
And still others, but perhaps only a few, may want to find someone who would want to change church rules on celibacy or the role of women in the church. It can be argued that since Benedict XVI has now broken centuries of traditions by retiring, other church traditions can be called into question as well. Ideologically, the cardinals may be cut from very similar cloth, but in the past 2 weeks of private meetings, they've spent their time trying to discern the qualities of the person in their midst who can guide the church toward the vision that most closely matches their own. The Holy Spirit will certainly be on the cardinals' minds as they vote, but influencing their decisions as well will be what they've heard from the other cardinals, from the public, and from those inside and outside the church about the challenges the new pope will face. Jim Bitterman, CNN, Rome.
Okay, tech issues sorted, fingers crossed. Let's go back to Dan Rivers and his guest now in Rome. Dan.
Thank you. Welcome back to the Quirinale. As we were saying, this is where conclaves used to happen back in the 1800s and before. I'm with Jimena Amorales again, architectural historian. You were just trying to tell us, before we got interrupted, about the huge contribution that the popes made to the city of Rome.
Yes, because they were like the owners. This was a state, the state of the church. That this was called the pontifical state. So for them it was just to become maybe as rich as it was England in those days, or maybe Spain, or maybe France. So for them, this was a city of the pilgrims, so had to be for them.
They built enormous numbers of art, edifices,
of fountains, of squares. They wanted to create spaces for the pilgrims. So every square was embellished with some Roman remain, because we cannot forget that we inherited the Roman Empire's remains, and as the obelisk that we have here behind, that it was taken here by Augustus and replaced here by a pope.
So in those days, the popes weren't confined to Vatican City. They had the whole city to play with,
yes,
architecturally.
Yes.
They built all kinds of things.
Yes, the Vatican was just their palace, and the rest of the city was for the pilgrims. So all these fountains, for example, were just to refresh the pilgrims that had to visit the Pope. People would come here during the summer to visit the Pope, and for them it was, they planned a city for them so that they could reach the different churches easily, just by using these obelisks as, for example, as beacons of Christianity. That was their goal.
Well, hopefully, if the technology works throughout the day, we'll thank you very much. Jimena. We'll try and take you on a bit of a tour around the other sites, Christy, around Rome, which are connected to the popes. For example, the Trevi Fountain. Not many people know they go there to throw a coin in for good luck. That also was funded and built by the popes. Back to you.
And that is fascinating to learn how the church has left a mark in the architecture, not just in Vatican City, but throughout the city of Rome. Dan Rivers joining us live. Thank you.
Hi, Christy. You're right. We are talking about a lot of travel problems across parts of Europe. But the good news is the heavy snowfall, it is winding down. We're still looking at some light snow coming down right now through parts of Germany. But for France, you can see it quieting down. A little bit of scattered shower activity off the coast of England. Now, for the snow, again, as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours, we're going to start to see more of that spreading over towards the east. And you can kind of see for yourself still some of these locations, especially to the east of the Adriatic Sea, we're going to see potentially about 14 centimeters of snowfall in Sarajevo. But let me show you some video, and this is a great one. It gives you a triple box of conditions in Brussels, as well as into Sussex in the UK and into France. Now, that was yesterday. You can see a lot of travel delays, not just by plane, but we're also talking about by car. You see the backup there. Well, as I take you over to our graphic, we want to give you the forecast for the remainder of today, and as well as really through the end of the week. What we're going to see, as I said, that snow making that way over towards the east. That low is going to be moving right through parts of Italy, bringing windy conditions as well as some scattered showers for areas like Italy, and then mostly rain. But that cold air, it's not going anywhere. The cold conditions will continue to be a problem as we go through the next 3 days. Here's your forecast for 3 hot spots, or maybe I should call them cold spots. For Berlin, we're expecting a high of only -1, we should say, on Thursday. And then notice for Warsaw as well, -3 and -4 degrees. Now, as we talk about what's happening in Europe, and we try to show you more of those temperatures, they're still running in some of these locations about 10 to 15 degrees below average. This gives you a wider view of conditions Berlin, you're certainly our cool spot with 0 degrees there, and Bucharest at -2 degrees. As we move over towards parts of Asia into China, just some clouds hugging the coastline. This is all courtesy of a front that's been bringing some rain and some snow through parts of Japan. But once we get that out of here, we are going to see high pressure building back in, and that is going to mean a return to mild conditions through parts of China. Now, I also want to leave you with some video coming out of Europe again. This is out of Brussels. And Christy, you know by now, you know I love weather and I love animals. So here's the combination. You saw a nice little puppy running in the snow again. This is out of Belgium, so it wasn't all bad. Of course, people came out to play in the snow. You can see the kids are having a good time. But I have to tell you, I'm happy to see you. I haven't seen you probably like a year on air.
I know. It's wonderful to be talking to you in real time on air.
We're reunited.
And thanks for the reports. Yeah, reunited. And smiling puppies.
It is.
Jen Delgado, leaving a mark in the show. Jen, thank you.
See you.
Is definitely for you. NASA's space rover Curiosity has literally scooped up what scientists say are the ingredients of life from the red planet. John Zarilla has more from Miami.
NASA scientists are certainly very, very excited this evening. You know, back when they chose the landing site for Curiosity, the Gale crater, they chose it for a reason. They believed that water once flowed in that area of Mars. And very early on in the Curiosity mission, they proved that, in fact, there was a dried-out riverbed there, and that, in fact, at one time, water did flow in that area of Mars. And they believe because of that, there was a chance that the ingredients for life might very well be found in that riverbed, in the Gale crater. And in fact, they proved today that they're right.
Mars has written its autobiography in the rocks of Gale crater. And we just started deciphering that story. So chapter 1, Yellowknife Bay. This was an ancient environment with the right elements, minerals indicating a near neutral environment, and slightly salty liquid water. All the prerequisites to support life, a habitable environment.
What they did was last month they drilled into a rock. It was the first time that they used Curiosity's drill to drill into a rock, and then the dust that was collected from the drill, scooped it up and put it in the onboard chemistry lab on Curiosity. First time any Mars vehicle has had that capability to do that. So they put that in the onboard chemistry lab, they analyzed it, and lo and behold, they find out that there's all of this life soup, these ingredients in this sample, things like sulfur, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide. Now, they have not proven that life existed on Mars. That's still perhaps down the road, and certainly they did not find evidence of life on Mars. But what they did find was evidence that, in fact, the ingredients for life were at one time in Mars's ancient history present, at least in this spot on Mars.
John Zarilla reporting on the latest big find from the Curiosity rover. You are watching News Streaming.
Steinstaub könnte die Lösung für eines der größten Rätsel der Raumfahrt bringen. Auf dem roten Planeten war nach Angaben der NASA wohl einst mikrobielles Leben möglich. Wann genau, das ist allerdings noch unklar.
Weit musste Curiosity auf dem Mars nicht umherfahren. Die Stelle, an der der Roboter die unglaubliche Entdeckung macht, ist nur ein paar hundert Meter vom Ort seiner Landung entfernt. Die Wissenschaftler sind von ihrem Erfolg begeistert. Ich glaube, wir haben eine bewohnbare Umgebung gefunden, die Leben unterstützt hat. Das Wasser an dieser Stelle war anscheinend so rein, dass wir es hätten trinken können, wenn wir dort gewesen wären. Im Yellowknife Bay, dort wo der Rover gut 6 cm tief gebohrt hat, könnten einst Flüsse oder ein See gewesen sein. Und wo lange Zeit Wasser war, da könnten auch mikroskopisch kleine Lebewesen gewohnt haben. Den Beweis dafür hat der Mars-Roboter mit einem Bohrer aus dem Gestein geholt. Spuren von Schwefel, Stickstoff, Phosphor und Kohlenstoff sind in der Probe, alles chemische Stoffe, die bei der Entstehung von Leben eine wichtige Rolle spielen. Für die NASA ist die Mission spätestens jetzt ein riesiger Erfolg. Was mich betrifft, ist das fantastisch. Ich denke, alles, was vom Roboter jetzt noch kommt, wird das nicht toppen. Wann genau der Mars für kleinste Organismen bewohnbar war und ob es sie tatsächlich gegeben hat, das ist weiter völlig unklar.
Now, Now, it's not on the face of it a very hospitable place, but the conditions in the Atacama Desert in Chile are perfect for one of the world's most ambitious astronomy projects. Arid, sunny, high altitude. All those attributes were sought by scientists involved in the ALMA project, which is being inaugurated later. It is expected to provide unprecedented information about the universe from the Atacama Desert. The BBC's Vladimir Hernandez has more.
These antennas are meant to represent a new cosmic dawn, and it is all happening here in the Atacama Desert in northern Chile. This is the Atacama Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array, better known as ALMA. It is located at 5,000 feet above sea level to allow these radio telescopes to bring back detailed views of an unknown cosmos.
Never before has there been an astronomy project with so many radio telescopes on site. They're all spread out, so they can guarantee the best resolution possible from what is expected to be unprecedented views of the universe.
And this is what the 66 radio telescopes on site are expected to get. Images of the cosmic gas and dust that build stars and galaxies millions of light years away. With ALMA, scientists believe they will gain a whole new understanding of how the universe was formed.
It will help to answer the question, are we alone? Are there other solar systems like ours? And the other question is, where are we coming from? So it refers to the origin of the universe. And I think that ALMA will really help to address these questions and come up with new information.
The ALMA project was built here in the Atacama Desert as the lack of rainfall helps the telescopes get the best view possible. This venture has cost at least $1.4 billion over the last decade, but scientist Ewan van Dieshoek, who's worked in this project for 20 years, told me it is important for society.
We like to know answers to questions like, is our planetary system unique in the universe? What is the chances for a twin sister sort of the Earth? Will that be around one of these stars that you see circling here? And more generally, you know, what is our place in this big universe?
By October, the 66 radio telescopes should be transmitting at full speed, and astronomers insist a new era of discoveries is about to begin. Vladimir Hernandez, BBC News, from the Atacama Desert.
It takes quite a long time to get going, and they have been gathering information for the last year or so, but what they are expecting from today is to have the project at full force by October, and therefore be able to be getting the best they can in terms of image resolution from the universes that they are going to be studied. There's a wide array of projects which they are studied. One is trying to look inside a black hole. The other one is a galaxy where 100 suns are formed every day. And these are the projects that are ongoing and will be now be able to be getting information after this inauguration and over the next year or so.
And Vladimir, just looking at the terrain behind you, it looks incredibly barren. Give us an idea of the life of people working on this project. What's their day-to-day existence going to be like?
Well, probably the people who work near the radio telescopes, which it's at 5,000 feet above sea level, they're the ones who probably have to work in tougher conditions. Right now where I am, it's a base camp where the scientists sort of work on every day, and this is 3,000 feet. But when you are at 5,000 feet and you have to do physical efforts to, let's say, to calibrate the antennas or to carry some gear, then most of the people there have to carry oxygen because it is really, really difficult to work in those conditions. Here, nonetheless, the sun is really bright. Everyone needs to have sunblocks and hats, and there's not much rainfall either. So to drink loads of water is a recommendation that they're always given to all the employees here. It is difficult conditions to work here.
Looks like an absolutely extraordinary place. Just before I let you go, Vladimir, this looks seriously expensive, not just to set up, but also to maintain. How's the funding going to work, not just this year, but, 10, 20, 30 years down the line?
Well, in a way, the inauguration is a bit about this, raising the profile of the radio telescope project to get this international awareness that this is actually important for astronomy, and astronomers here are keen to stress out that it is important for society. It has costed over $1.3 billion over the last decade, but when we've spoken to the astronomers here, to the directors of the project, they're also quite keen in saying that this is something that will benefit everyone. For instance, these technological developments here could also have a benefit for daily issues of companies, for daily gadgets that the people can get. So, in a way, it's a rollover effect which they think could reach everyone.
Fantastic to speak to you. Vladimir, thank you very much indeed. Never mind looking into space, it looks like Vladimir already is in space, judging by that terrain. Astonishing pictures there from Chile.
I mean, it's quite incredible. You spend hours in the rain looking at a chimney. It sort of feels a bit mad, but anyway, it's not. You know, we're here for a reason, and we'll keep doing it, guys.
Yeah, and certainly the view that we have in the television public has on the television screen is a lot better than the view most people have in St. Peter's Square, because it's actually quite, you know, the pipe is rather small, the chimney is rather small.
Well, it certainly looks small on the television screen, although it's actually bigger than a human being when you see it being installed. The guys who are putting it in are actually dwarfed by that chimney. Just when you see it framed on the screen against the majesty of the Apostolic Palace and so forth, it looks diminutive. But look, what's going to happen in the square, of course, is that not everybody in there has a clear line of sight to the chimney. They will feed off the reaction of others in the square. And often when the smoke first starts to come out, just on the basis of the hope, the kind of wing and prayer that a pope has been elected, you'll get an initial roar and then a kind of disappointed growl when it becomes clear that that actually hasn't happened.
And then when word circulates throughout not only Vatican City, but also throughout Rome that a pope has been chosen, more and more people will come, because there's about a 45-minute to an hour lag between the smoke and we first getting our glimpse of who the Pope is.
Yeah, that's right, because a lot of things happen between that moment when the Pope is elected and the smoke comes out and him stepping out on that central balcony. I mean, remember, the Pope himself has to be vested inside a room adjacent to the Sistine Chapel called the Room of Tears. Each cardinal personally has to come up and profess his loyalty to the new Pope. Meanwhile, the senior cardinal deacon will step out and make the Habemus Papam announcement. And between that announcement and getting your first glimpse of the new Pope, as you say, normally there's a half hour, 45 minutes, up to an hour, which means that lots and lots of Romans, as the news breaks that there's a new Pope, are going to come flooding to the square to be part of history.
Yeah, and
I think that we also have to start thinking about, let's say there's black smoke tonight, 2 unsuccessful ballots. It really changes the entire game, right, John?
Well, sure. I mean, you know, we were talking earlier today, Chris, that in a way, even though it's Wednesday, this is the Super Tuesday of the papal race. It's a chance for the front runners either to close the deal or to look like they're never going to get to that 2/3 threshold, in which case the Cardinals have to go back to the drawing board, so to speak, and look for someone else. So if there is black smoke tonight, I think it would be reasonable to conclude that no one in the early rounds had such overwhelming support that they were a slam dunk, which may mean that the stage is being set for a surprise at the end of this process.
The big question becomes, well, who fits the bill as that kind of surprise? Do you go to someone you have to completely reintroduce, or do you go to someone safe so that you don't extend the conclave too much? That's the balance you were talking about earlier.
Right. And certainly the concern about having a conclave that goes on too long, as we said before, is it does send a message of disunity, which is the last thing a lot of these cardinals want to say.
Yeah, I think not only do they not want to send a message of disunity, but they also don't want the new pope to appear compromised. They don't want him to look like the pope of one faction in the church. They want him to look like the pope of the entire church, who has the unified support of the College of Cardinals. And so there is tremendous pressure, I think, that these cardinals feel. On the one hand, they want to get this right, and they want to take as long as it takes to get it right. And it's worth reminding people, there's no shot clock on a papal election. I mean, they will go until somebody gets 2/3. On the other hand, they also don't want to project images of gridlock and paralysis, and they don't want the Pope to be compromised from the get-go. And putting those two things together is often very difficult to do in the pressure cooker environment of being inside the Sistine Chapel.
You mentioned that all 115 or 114 cardinals then pledge allegiance to the new Pope. How factionalized, though, is Vatican City? I mean, once the Pope has become the Pope, assumes power, there are still factions that remain, no?
Oh, sure. I mean, look, the Vatican is like the White House or 10 Downing Street. I mean, it's a complex bureaucracy, and there are always going to be different currents within it. And one of the most important things the new pope has to do is to indicate that he is not going to be the pope of one or another of those tribes, but that somehow he's going to try to be a leader for all. And of course, that point doesn't just apply to the Vatican, because the Catholic Church on the ground is often badly divided. I mean, we know that about the 65 million Catholics in the United States. You and I both know that on an average day, those 65 million Catholics couldn't agree on what day of the week it is, let alone what direction the church ought to go. The Pope somehow has to try to appeal to all of that wild, riotous diversity in the church.
And we're seeing a lot of that diversity, not only in the cardinals who are inside the conclave, but out in St. Peter's Square, people from all around the world who have gathered, waiting to see that smoke, as we all are.
If you hear these ambulances that are going by us now, there happens to be a hospital right near our position, so they mean no sense of urgency here, other than the obvious urgency that's going on behind us in the Sistine Chapel right now as we continue to wait. We're about somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour between when this next vote will be tallied, and then there will be smoke, black or white, we don't know, but there will certainly be smoke at the end of the balloting for today. As we sit here on Smoke Watch, let's head back into Atlanta now. Guys?
Thank you so much, Chris, John, and Anderson. We'll check back with you.
Yeah, guess staying dry, I hope, too. It's been a miserable day there in Rome. Now,
we met up with Stefan from Berlin. Stefan, you're waiting to see the smoke, but you said that you weren't a fan of Pope Benedict. You're a Catholic, but who would you like to see as the next Pope, then?
Well, I don't know much about all the candidates there are, but I guess it's only about, like, conservative or ultra-conservative, so somebody conservative then? I don't know.
Because, I mean, the other aspect of the new Pope is that, as well as being the head of your church, of the Catholic Church, and 1.2 billion people, he would also be the head of state, the Vatican State, worldwide.
Yeah, well, but who cares about the Vatican State? It's about the Catholic Church, and you say it's 1.2 billion people, and it should be somebody who opens up the church and leads it to modernity, to the 21st century, and I don't know if any of the candidates can do it.
Well, most of the candidates were either picked by Pope Benedict, or they were picked by John Paul II, both of whom known as conservatives. Actually, by law, the candidates in there, the 115 cardinals, could actually choose a Catholic from outside their number. What kind of person, what qualities would you be looking for, ideally, in a Pope?
I'd be looking for somebody open, wise, charismatic.
Katya Adler reporting there. There is still a bird left sitting on top of the Sistine Chapel. Maybe it knows more than we do. From the Vatican, back to you in London.
we've been laughing and joking about the seagull that is sitting on top of the chimney there at the Sistine Chapel. Breaking news, Fred.
That's right. It now has a Twitter handle.
Of course it does.
Yeah, so you can tweet it or it'll tweet you back.
Look, we're not kidding. It's got 70 followers now. It had 68 a minute ago. Yeah, it's at Sistine Seagull.
And there, of course, is one of the first tweets, hanging out at Conclave, loving life and Cheetos, Sistine Chapel chimney.
70 followers already. And, of course, a bird would tweet. Chad Myers just popped out here, and I've got to tell you, too, we were talking about the bird being engulfed in smoke and having a bit of a cough when it all happens, and Chad was telling us that but just before the smoke comes up, they heat the chimney to help with the flow of the smoke and put an exhaust fan on. So if you see the bird suddenly, you know, get a bit startled, that's because the heat is coming up.
That's right. The bird will know first when the smoke is on its way.
That bird is getting to be getting more publicity than the cardinals.
It's famous now, and it continues to, you know, kind of fluff its feathers, knowing that it's being shown around the world. All eyes are on that seagull.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Mann at the CNN Center, and we are still following developments at the Vatican, where cardinals are in the Sistine Chapel selecting the next pope. Becky Anderson is watching the smoke signals and joins us now from the Vatican. I guess the bottom line is still more black smoke, Becky?
Well, no smoke on the fourth ballot. That's the first of the afternoon, which means that no pope has been elected. So in the first sessions of each morning and evening session, of course, there may be no smoke, but you always get smoke in the second session. Yesterday evening, it was around 7:42, and it's around about 6 o'clock here now, so we could be looking at smoke in the next sort of 90 minutes or so. Already outstripped the time that it took Joseph Ratzinger to be elected. He was elected on the 4th ballot, which was the mid-afternoon session on the 2nd day, and that had been around 5:05 in the evening. So we're on. His record, to a certain extent, hasn't been beaten. And yeah, we're still watching, effectively. It's over there. It's above my left shoulder. It's quite difficult, it's got to be said, Jonathan, in the evening when it goes dark here, as it was yesterday when we saw the smoke for the first time, to actually tell what colour it is. You can see it on the very close camera, but from here, for me and for everybody, the thousands who are in the square, it's actually quite difficult to identify whether it's white or black, but we'll work it out for you when it comes.
I want to ask you about the thousands. Then we're getting a shot of all of those people getting rained on just the same way you are.
Yeah.
Tell us about them. I mean, there are all these people out there. They are dealing with the weather. There's the suspense. There's the disappointment to contend with. Who are these people? How are they faring?
Well, it's interesting. The square is quite empty at the times during the day when people know there's no chance of the election of the Pope. But slowly but surely, both yesterday evening, this morning, and then around about now, you see people sort of moving towards the square, and then suddenly you realise there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of people. All of a sudden, they're quiet, they move very slowly, there's no sense of a football crowd by any stretch of the imagination. Here, they are lots of tourists who have got an unscheduled event on their tourist itinerary. There are pilgrims, there are nuns, I mean, it's complete mix, a sort of smorgasbord, as it were, of people gathering there. Most of them, when we speak to them, say, and we've spoken to a lot of people since we've been here, say they just want to be in the square at the time that the smoke comes, be it black or white. Obviously, everybody wants to be there when it goes white, because, of course, within 45 minutes of that smoke, you will see a new Pope on the balcony behind me there with the red curtain. There are 115 cardinals inside the Sistine Chapel as we speak. One of them will emerge as Pope, and that is something that pretty much everybody in Rome wants to be part of at this time.
And all those people standing outside really aren't getting much news from inside. The conclave is secret, of course. So no. I guess they just wait and watch. You say it's not a football crowd. I suppose we're going to hear cheering when we see the white smoke, but we've already seen the black smoke. Yes. Is there a collective moan as all those wet, cold people assimilate the news?
Not a collective moan. There was a sort of gasp yesterday evening when we saw the smoke for the first time, and it was the first smoke after the very first ballot of this conclave, of course, so there was a real sense of anticipation. But there was a sort of audible gasp when people really thought that the smoke was white, and then a sort of, you know, they sort of realised that there hadn't been the election of a Pope at that stage. Nobody was really expecting it. They didn't even have to vote on that first ballot, or they didn't have to hold that first ballot. So, yeah, it's not a moan. I mean, people are very stoic. It really is miserable. They call it mazzo pazzo here in Rome. It's the madness of March. This is incessant rain. It often comes at this time of the year. This is not the Rome that many viewers will have seen if they visited here April, May, June, July. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful city, and still is, but it is miserable at the moment. So these are stoic, hardy people standing in that square. I mean, we've been sort of in and out of coffee shops all day as we've been here, but, you know, lots and lots of people may have been there since the morning session. Certainly, many thousands of people have been moving up towards the square in the last 90 minutes or so, and they may still have another hour and a half to go.
Becky Anderson, live for us, waiting for the gasps to turn into cheers, while that one lonely bird, that hardy bird, is waiting to be moved by the smoke that we're expecting. You're looking at live pictures, and those are the headlines for this hour.
Und manch kleinere Bistümer haben auch noch mehr. Also, jedenfalls, wir haben Rauch. Ach, wunderbar. Wir haben Rauch, und der sieht momentan weiß aus. Weiß aus. Das heißt, es sieht aus, als hätten wir einen Papst. Hier ist große Aufregung.
Doch davon sind die Kardinäle derzeit weit entfernt.
Und wir schalten direkt weiter zu unserem Reporter Lothar Keller in Rom. Lothar, mit dem neuen Mann im Vatikan werden ja irgendwie immense Erwartungen auf einen Wandel in der katholischen Kirche verknüpft. Wird Franziskus diese Hoffnung überhaupt erfüllen können oder wollen?
In vielen Fragen, die manch kritischen katholischen Gläubigen interessieren, da steht er genauso feste auf dem Boden der traditionellen katholischen Lehre wie seine beiden Vorgänger. Es wird weiterhin keine Frauen als Priester geben. Und Homosexuelle werden auch weiterhin nicht mit dem Segen der katholischen Kirche heiraten können. Also wenn dieser Papst etwas ändert, dann auf andere Weise. Und das hat er durch seine Worte und seine Gesten in diesen ersten Stunden schon deutlich gemacht. Er will, dass die Kirche wieder bescheidener auftritt und damit nach den Skandalen der vergangenen Zeit wieder an Glaubwürdigkeit gewinnt. Und er will wohl, dass die Kirche sich wieder stärker um die Armen in der Welt kümmert, so wie er als Kardinal von Buenos Aires das zuvor auch in Argentinien getan hat. Dazu jetzt mehr in einem Beitrag von meiner Kollegin Friede Gutmann.
Die rechte Hand Gottes. Wo sonst sollte der neue Papst herkommen als aus Maradona-Land? Und wen wundert's, Jorge Mario Bergoglio ist Fußballfan wie sein ganzes Land. Für uns Argentinier fühlt es sich an, als hätten wir die Fußball-Weltmeisterschaft gewonnen. Und auch sonst ist der neue Papst nahe am Volk, erzählt uns sein deutscher Freund.
Er hat eine Schwäche für die Schwachen. Und das ist, glaube ich, was ihn auszeichnet. So habe ich ihn jedenfalls kennengelernt.
Anders als diese Möwe, die sich gestern frech ins globale Rampenlicht drängte, gilt Franziskus als äußerst bescheiden. Seine Rechnung im Gästehaus in Rom hat er auch als Papst heute selbst beglichen. Und die Mächtigen warnt er immer wieder vor Korruption und der teuflischen Macht des Geldes. Ganz wie sein Namensgeber Franz von Assisi, der Anwalt der Armen.
Franziskus war derjenige, der den Mächtigen die Stirn geboten hat, der ein Freund der Armen war. In diesem Namen steckt viel Programm, da steckt viel Hoffnung.
Viele aber wird er enttäuschen. Schon als Bischof von Buenos Aires kämpfte er gegen die Homo-Ehe. Und auch zur Zeit der argentinischen Militärjunta war seine Weste nicht ganz unbefleckt.
Ob er da zu weit gegangen ist in der Anpassung, das weiß ich nicht. Er wurde angeklagt, er hätte auch Ordensbrüder ausgeliefert. Das kann ich eigentlich im strengen Sinn nicht annehmen, dass er das getan hat.
Im Vatikan warten auf Franziskus große Aufgaben, Stichwort Vatileaks und Missbrauchsskandal. Kein Pappenstiel für einen 76-Jährigen, der seit seiner Jugend mit nur einem Lungenflügel leben muss.
Franziskus hat gestern ja als erstes ein Gebet für seinen Vorgänger Benedikt XVI. Gesprochen. Lothar, glauben Sie, er wird sich beim emeritierten deutschen Papst auch vielleicht mal Rat holen für die anstehenden Aufgaben?
Also ich glaube, dass dieser erfahrene Kardinal nicht viele Ratschläge braucht und Benedikt hat ja auch angekündigt, dass er sich nicht einmischen will. Aber er hinterlässt seinem Nachfolger etwas, nämlich ein dickes Dossier über Vati-Leaks, über die Hintergründe des Geheimnisverrates im Vatikan. Und wenn der neue Papst das liest, dann wird ihm nochmal sehr klar werden, was er zunächst tun muss. Er muss zunächst hier etwas in der Kurie, der Vatikanverwaltung ändern, muss dort aufräumen, bevor er anfängt, in der Weltkirche etwas ändern zu können. Das war übrigens auch eine zentrale Forderung sehr vieler Kardinäle an den neuen Papst, schon vor dem Konklave.
Vielen Dank für Ihre Einschätzung, Lothar Keller, heute und auch in den vergangenen Tagen.
Das sogenannte ALMA-Teleskop wurde jetzt offiziell in Betrieb genommen. Es steht an einem der trockensten Orte der Welt, in der chilenischen Atacama-Wüste. ALMA besteht aus insgesamt 66 solcher Antennen. Sie sind miteinander verbunden und wirken wie eine riesige Teleskopschüssel mit 16 Kilometern Durchmesser. Wissenschaftler beobachten mit ALMA die Entstehung von Planeten und Sternen. Manfred Ahlers berichtet.
Die gigantische Anlage liegt auf über 5000 Metern Höhe. Hier ist der Blick in das Weltall frei, ohne störenden irdischen Wasserdampf. Was die 66 Megateleskope auffangen, wird in diesem Großrechner zu einem Sternenbild verarbeitet. Viel genauer als bisher.
Mit den bisherigen Teleskopen war es halt nur möglich, dass wir diese äußere Hülle beobachten konnten. Und mit ALMA, mit den 66 Antennen, haben wir jetzt die räumliche Auflösung, dass wir diese innere Struktur, diese Spiralstruktur hier eben auch auflösen können.
Die Wissenschaftler nennen ALMA ihr cooles Teleskop, denn mit ihm können sie auch eiskalte Gaswolken erkennen. Die Astronomen fanden schon jetzt Grundsubstanzen von Leben in fernen Hemisphären.
In diesen kalten Gaswolken haben wir Moleküle entdeckt. Zum Beispiel Zucker ist da vorhanden, den wir jetzt im Weltraum entdeckt haben, um einen jungen Stern herum. Die Zucker ist Grundbaustein für Leben.
Jetzt wurde ALMA vom chilenischen Präsidenten Piñera offiziell eröffnet. Es ist ein Gemeinschaftsprojekt von Wissenschaftlern aus Europa, Amerika und Asien. Für die Astronomen kann es der ganz weite Sprung in ferne Galaxien werden und ein Blick 13 Milliarden Jahre zurück in die Ursprünge des Weltalls.
Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Houston International Space Station, ready for the event.
Canada Aviation and Space Museum. This is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for voice check.
Chris Hadfield, Space Station. This is Canada Air and Space Museum. How do you copy?
Canada Aviation and Space Museum. David, the space station reads you loud and clear. How me?
We have you loud and clear. Can everybody hear him? Chris, I have someone here who would like to introduce our special guest for you.
Commander, welcome to Ottawa. Boys and girls, please help me welcome Mrs. Laureen Harper and her husband, the 22nd Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Stephen Harper. We're going to be ready in a moment. You all excited to be here, kids? Can the space station hear a big cheer from all of you? Big cheer! Come on, hooray! Have we got the commander ready to go? Can you hear me, Commander?
Absolutely. I hear you loud and clear. I hope you can hear me as well also. Thank you.
And I can see you. It's a great picture. It's great to hear you. En commençant, je voudrais dire que c'est un moment historique. Je tiens à vous féliciter d'être le premier Canadien de commander la Station Spatiale Internationale. Commander, I just want to congratulate you on this historic achievement. You're the first Canadian ever to command the International Space Station. We're all very proud of you here.
Merci, monsieur. Thank you very much. After, 35 years of service to my country and to my government, I am so incredibly proud to have the chance to do this now. I get to go from Vancouver Island and see the Arctic and see the Maritimes in 10 minutes, coast to coast. And it just fills me with pride. And also, as a result of technology, I get to link with Canadians coast to coast of all ages. And I ask every Canadian, from the machine shops that help build this place, to the software labs, to the inventors and the creative minds that made all this possible, when they look up and see the point of light that is the International Space Station, all Canadians should take pride in what we can do together.
Well, it must be a tremendous experience. I know as I fly across the country, I'm always amazed how big it is, how empty most of it is, but for you to be able to see it in 10 minutes is just is really an incredible experience we can only dream about. Now, Commander, I have a few questions myself, but we have a lot of kids here who want to ask questions. So I'm going to go straight to them first because I know we don't have a lot of time today. We have a very brief hookup. So let me begin with Emerson Bartel, Children's Wish Foundation, is going to ask a question.
Is there anything that you fear in space or something that makes you uncomfortable?
Emerson, I'm afraid when I don't have a plan, when I can't get ready for something. You know, there are always things happening, and some of them are scary if you're not ready. So what I always try and do is no matter what's happening, whether it's something simple or something dangerous, I prepare for it. I think about it. I visualize what I can do and therefore what I'm going to do. And then no matter what it is, whether I'm facing, it makes me feel better about it, and it stops me being afraid of it. And that's whether I'm piloting a spaceship or commanding the space station or speaking with the Prime Minister of Canada or talking with you, Emerson. I just try and get ready, and then I'm not afraid.
It's Lorraine Harper here. I would like to introduce Robbie Passmore-Waugh of the Children's Wish Foundation to ask the commander a question. Come on up, Robbie.
What do you do when you get sick in space?
Thank you, Robbie. We try not to get sick, of course. You can't catch a cold up here because there's no one to catch a cold from. But everybody on board is trained as an emergency medical technician. So I can do all basic medicine. I've worked in a hospital in the emergency room, taking care of people as they come in with all different injuries. So I really understand the basics that I need to know. Right here under my feet is our emergency medical kit and pharmacy. Behind me is like a stretcher that if someone got sick, we could strap them to that stretcher. And then we also on board with our crew, we have Dr. Tom Marshburn, a medical doctor. And so Dr. Tom could take care of each of us. But if Tom got sick, then I'd be taking care of Tom. So we're ready for it. We try not to get sick. We're careful. But if we need to, we're ready to take care of each other medically.
Good job, Robbie. Prochaine question.
The next question
Présentée par Marie de Grandpré.
will be asked for Marie from Grand Pré.
De la part de Elizabeth de l'École publique.
She's going to ask a question on behalf of Elizabeth from Centennial Public School in Kitchener. Why is it so important for Canada to be a partner in the International Space Station?
C'est une bonne question.
It's a good question.
Pour quelques buts différents.
It is very important for many reasons. First, it's a unique laboratory.
La pesanteur. Et donc, nous avons la chance.
In matter of gravity.
Avec cette,
So we're fortunate
international
with this international structure
qui sont impossibles.
to do all kind of experiments that are not normally possible.
Mais aussi, je pense que c'était
But also, I think it's important
inspiration pour les jeunes Canadiens.
for us, with respect to aspiration, for the young Canadian,
De la possibilité.
to do something that is on the border of the realm of possibility. And it is necessary to dream.
Opportunité comme ça.
And for young Canadians to have an opportunity like this, to have such a laboratory like this. And that's the second thing that is important for Canadians and the Canadian people in general.
I would like to introduce Darcy McCrae, Children's Wish, to ask Commander Hadfield a question on behalf of Henry, who's 12, from Wellington Hall Academy in Guelph, Ontario.
Good afternoon, Commander Hatfield. Here's a question. Does Canada look like you would expect it to from space? Does it look just like it does on a map, or is there anything that is really unique or stands out from space?
Thank you for the question. When you're going this fast and seeing so much of it, when I'm overhead of Winnipeg, I can still look back and see I can see the Rockies, and I can see all the way to Ottawa, basically. And to be able to see the country that way as we race across, what is different than I expected was the size of it. We live in an enormous, very rich land, so much opportunity and capability for each of us. But then as you come across, especially at night, each of the places where we gather together, the cities and the towns, even the farms, they show up as little places of warmth, of little pockets of light. And as I travel across the prairies and then come around the bigger cities, of course, the provincial capitals, and all around Lake Ontario and Ottawa and Montreal, you can see the level of activity. It just strikes you, the huge, vast capability, the raw capability of our country, and then the way that we're using it. And then when you come, the last place I see in Canada always is the Maritimes, coming across Cape Breton and Newfoundland, and that solid, rugged rock that is our East Coast. It's a great way every time to wave farewell to Canada till we come around the world again. It just warms my heart every time to see the potential of our country and to see the way that we live there together.
Merci. On aura maintenant une
Thank you.
question de Thomas.
We're going to have a question now from Thomas.
Va poser une question.
Thomas is going to ask a question on behalf of twins Evan and Alexa from Dundas Central Public School in Dundas, Ontario.
J'ai deux questions. Quel pays
I have
est le
two
plus
questions.
vu de l'espace?
Which country is the most colored looking from space?
Propre lit?
And do you miss your own bed?
Oui, c'est deux questions.
Yes, there's two questions.
C'est les Bahamas, les îles Bahamas.
For me, it's the Bahamas Islands that are the most colored.
Récif Corée.
Because of the barrier reef, the colors are unbelievable.
Tous les bleus qui existent.
All the different shades of blue.
Comme arc du ciel.
It's like a rainbow under the water. And every time it strikes my eye, it's incredible. It's shining. As for the second question, sleeping here in space,
Vous n'avez pas besoin d'un lit.
you don't need a bed, really. You don't need a pillow. It's so comfortable.
Totalement relaxé.
You know, it's possible to be totally relaxed. Every single muscle is totally relaxed.
Être dans la chambre à coucher.
So for me, it's even better than to be in my bedroom and be in my bed on Earth.
Merveilleux pour dormir.
So this is a marvelous place to sleep in space.
Scandia to ask Commander Hadfield a question on behalf of the grade 3 class of South Poplar Elementary, Abbotsford, British Columbia.
Hello, Commander Hadfield. Hello, Commander Hadfield. Here's my question. What advice do you have for the aspiring astronauts in our class and across the country?
Okay, three things. Number one is education. And I don't just mean reading it, what you're told in school. Education is learning things. Education is desiring to know things, to know new things every single day, to always try and understand what's going around you. Constantly educate yourself. Number two is take care of your body. You only get one. Don't, think about what you're eating when you eat. You choose everything that you eat. And exercise your body. Take the stairs, carry things, don't drag things. Exercise your body. It doesn't take much, just keep yourself in shape. And then the third is make decisions. Choose things. And at first you may not make all good decisions, but decision making is a skill, and you can learn it and get better at it. And the more decisions you make, the better you will be at making them. And with those three things, education, a healthy body, and the ability to make good decisions, you will succeed no matter what you do in life, including maybe have a chance to fly in space.
That does sound like good advice for a lot of things. Maintenant, Commandant, je vous présente.
Now, Commander, I would like to present you Alexander Brown.
De la part de Ezra.
He's going to ask a question on behalf of Ezra, a 5-year-old boy from the Elizabeth Ziegler School in Waterloo, Ontario.
Pouvez-vous voir la planète tourner?
Can you see the planet turn, go around itself?
Pas directement pour voir la planète.
Not directly, to be able to see the Earth turn. It only turns twice a day on a 24 period. So every 90 minutes we're in an orbit. So as far as the Earth turning, so every time we look at the Earth again, there's just maybe a country or part of the Earth that has moved a little bit. So not directly, but indirectly, yes. It's possible to see the Earth go around itself from the space station.
I would like to introduce Alexa Hillier to ask Commander Hadfield a question on behalf of Colin, grade 6, Scott Bateman Middle School.
Hi, Commander Hatfield. Is there turbulence in space, and can you feel it like in an airplane?
There is no turbulence up here at all. It is smoother than silk. It's like if you've ever been skating on perfect new ice just after the Zamboni goes, and everything, you just slide across the ice and you don't feel even a ripple. Or or maybe down a perfect slide, nice and wet, where everything's just beautifully smooth. It's like that. There's never a bump. You can float and fly, and it's sort of like magic. But no, it's perfectly comfortable. You should try it. It's great.
I'd like to introduce Commander Matthew Broughton. Matthew is bringing us a question on behalf of a Twitter account, SteffiPoo446. I'm going to assume that's not a real name. She is in Centennial Public School, also in Waterloo, Ontario. Matthew.
Is it possible to land on Mars in the near future?
Steffi and Matthew, yes. In fact, of course, I'm sure as you know, Canada is already on Mars. We have scientific experiments, scientific hardware that was built by Canadians, smart, educated engineers and scientists that is helping us to understand Mars right now. Because you can't understand the human body by looking at just one person. You can't understand planets just by looking at one. By understanding the history of Mars and the history of the Earth and the others, we can really start to get a feel for what's in store for Earth itself. But I think probably your question is, could people go to Mars? And yes, things we've learned on the space station, how to stay in space for months and months, how to build things, what equipment to build it out of, yes. But right now, it's sort of like sailing around the world hundreds of years ago or flying across the Atlantic 100 years ago. It's just barely possible, but it would be very risky and so therefore quite expensive. And I think what we need to do is invent some more things. We need Canadians like you to come up with great inventions like the Canadarm or like Microflow, which is a great Canadian experiment that I'm working on. It just came up last week. We need inventions that will make travel to Mars safer and faster, energy sources and engines. So yes, we could do it if we had to, and I'm sure we'll do it in the future. It's just a matter of things that we can invent. We're limited just by our own imagination and creativity.
I would like to introduce Ava Gandia to ask Commander Hadfield a question on behalf of Jacqueline from York House School, Vancouver, British Columbia.
Hello, Commander Hadfield. My first question is, what has been the most interesting part of being an astronaut and going to space? And have you had any interesting experiences that you will never forget?
I think I could answer both those questions with the same answer, actually. And being inside a spaceship is wonderful, magnificent. Being weightless, doing all of this experiments, being here with a great group of people, wonderful, motivated, humble people. But the most magnificent experience was going outside, putting on the big white spacesuit and walking in space. And the reason is, not only was I out there building Canadarm2 and bolting it together and bringing Canada's robot arm to life, but I was alone with these two hands and these two eyes in between the world on one side, turning in all of its colors, and the universe on the other, in all of its absolutely fundamental blackness and the rest of everything. And I was there holding on to this vehicle, this space station, with one hand, one of the first humans to ever be able to see our world that way and to get a sense of the perspective myself. It'll be with me always. It is a magnificent experience to see the world and to see the universe that way. I was the first Canadian to ever do it, but I'm not the last. I hope more Canadians, including you, get a chance to see the world that way. It changes how you think.
Thank you, Commander. That was our last student question, and I see your colleagues, David Saint-Jacques and Jeremy Hansen, have appeared, which means we're about due to wrap this up. So I know we all want to thank you for spending time with us. Vous avez l'esprit des pionniers.
You have a pioneer spirit. You have a spirit of enterprise. It's a new era, and it's a great exploration in your life, and we're very proud of you. And we congratulate you on your success, and we wish you great fortune.
I just want to say that you represent the kind of spirit we had in the explorers who went out and found our country and built our country, and you're carrying that into a modern age. We're all very proud of you. we wish you good luck and success. We have all these kids who've done such a great job asking the questions, other children who are with them. We have your parents here, so let's all together give Commander Hatfield one more big cheer.
On Monday, Commander Kevin Ford had charged the batteries in the synchronized position hold, engage, reorient experimental satellites known as spheres and reviewed experiment procedures to prepare for a test session of a ground-commanded spheres vertigo experiment. The objective of the experiment is to demonstrate the ability to create a three-dimensional model of an object in space using the free-flying spheres robots. Also on Monday, Marshburn had performed some maintenance work on a carbon dioxide removal assembly in the Destiny laboratory, removing and replacing a desiccant bed and other components. Hatfield on Monday had set up the microflow technology demonstration hardware and tested biological samples with its miniaturized flow cylinder. Hatfield also had some time set aside to participate in an in-flight educational event with students in Alberta, answering some questions about his experiment work and life aboard the space station. On Tuesday, Hatfield had worked with the Voice-Activated Crew User Interface System Enhancement, also known as CRUISE, which is a European Space Agency technology demonstration that hopes to someday improve crew members' operations and work efficiency aboard the station. Marshburn had collected air samples for analysis and performed an inspection of the compound-specific analyzer combustion products, changing out the batteries in all of the units as well as calibrating and deactivating them. Ford, Marshburn, and Hatfield also had some time set aside to participate in an in-flight interview with CNN's newsroom program. They answered questions about science and life aboard the orbiting laboratory. Expedition 34 Commander Kevin Ford handed over the command of the International Space Station to Flight Engineer Chris Hadfield during a change of command ceremony on Wednesday. Hadfield, a veteran of the Canadian Space Agency, is the first Canadian commander of the space station. Expedition 35 will officially begin with the undocking of the Soyuz TMA-06M spacecraft. On Wednesday, Ford and flight engineers Yevgeny Turelkin and Novinsky had continued their preparations for their journey back to Earth, stowing away items and making their final equipment checks. On Wednesday, Marshburn had worked with the capillary flow experiment 2. This investigates how fluids flow across surfaces in a weightless environment. Results from this experiment will improve computer models used to design fluid transfer systems and fuel tanks on the future spacecraft. Also on Wednesday, Hatfield had loaded software into the computers that govern the functions of the Window Observation Research Facility, known as WRF, in the Destiny Laboratory, and also transferred cargo into the SpaceX Dragon cargo craft. And on Thursday, the 3 Expedition 34 crew members wrapped up preparations for their return to Earth. After nearly 5 months aboard the International Space Station, Commander Kevin Ford of NASA, Russian Soyuz Commander Oleg Novitsky, and Russian flight engineer Yevgeny Turelkin were scheduled to undock their Soyuz spacecraft from the space station yesterday evening. Because of inclement weather prohibited the recovery efforts, the Russian Federal Space Agency decided Thursday late afternoon to postpone the evening's landing of Expedition 34 and its Soyuz TMA-06M spacecraft. Ford, Turelkin, and Novitsky will try again today for their homecoming, preparing for a landing northeast of the Kazakh town of Arkalyk early Saturday morning on Kazakh time. The landing is scheduled to take place at 10:05 p.m. Central Time. Today, 8 of the 12 Russian helicopters were deployed earlier this morning from Kustanai to pre-stage for the landing operations near the prime landing zone and at the leading edge of the ballistic landing zone for tonight. The other 4 helicopters with support personnel will deploy from Kustanai directly to the landing site early Saturday morning on Kazakh time later this evening. Forecast for landing is just about perfect with a few clouds expected and temperatures in the mid-teens. We'll provide coverage of the Expedition 34 crew departure at 3 p.m. Central Time as the crew members bid their farewells and close the hatches between the vehicles. NASA television also, the undocking coverage will begin at 6:15 p.m. Deorbit and landing coverage will begin at 8:45 p.m. and will continue until the crew is safely in the medical tent at the landing site. Again, landing is scheduled to occur at 10:05 p.m. Central Time.
Gefragt war nach dem Urknall. Der Urknall ist nach Meinung der meisten Wissenschaftler der Beginn von allem. Der Urknall ist keine Explosion in einem bestehenden Raum, sondern er ist die Entstehung von Raum, Zeit und Materie aus einem winzigen Punkt. Er ist der Anfang aller Atome, Sterne und Galaxien. Beweisen lässt sich der Urknall als Beginn von allem bisher nicht. Aber immerhin gibt es genügend Hinweise darauf, dass unser Universum auf diese Weise entstanden ist. So passt die heutige Verteilung der Materie im Universum ganz hervorragend zu der Idee von einem Urknall. Ein sehr wichtiger Hinweis war 1929 die Beobachtung von Edwin Hubble, dass sich das Universum ausdehnt. Er konnte dieses Phänomen anhand der Rotverschiebung der Galaxien erklären. Heute nimmt man übrigens an, dass diese Expansion nie aufhört. So liegt es nahe zu vermuten, dass die Expansion des Universums einen Anfang gehabt haben musste. Und die schlüssigste Theorie für diesen Anfang ist die vom Urknall, der vor 13,7 Milliarden Jahren den Beginn unseres Weltalls begründete. Es gibt noch einen weiteren starken Hinweis, die kosmische Hintergrundstrahlung. Dieses Echo des Urknalls ist in allen Richtungen des Universums mit gleicher Intensität und annähernd gleicher Temperatur messbar. Ein wichtiger Mosaikstein zur Theorie des Urknalls.
Jetzt noch ein Hinweis auf das, was Sie auf keinen Fall verpassen sollten, denn nur ganz selten kann man Kometen mit bloßem Auge erkennen. Am Nachthimmel über New Mexico sind die Konturen des Kometen Pan-STARRS bereits deutlich zu sehen. Und je mehr er sich der Sonne nähert, umso länger wird der Kometenschweif werden. Das können schon ein paar Millionen Kilometer dann sein. Der Schweif besteht aus Staub und Eisteilchen, die die Sonne vom Kometenkern abdampft. Ab heute Abend bis Montag dürfte man Pan-STARRS auch bei uns am Nachthimmel sehen. Staunen Sie gut. Bis bald wieder. Bis Nano.
Es war ein Spektakel und das soll Kunst ja auch sein. Die Verhüllung des Reichstags Mitte der 90er Jahre durch das Künstlerpaar Christo und Jean-Claude. Vor 3 Jahren starb die Frau an seiner Seite und viele fragten sich, ob und wie Christo weitermachen würde, ohne seine Muse mit dem feuerroten Haar. Er hat weitergemacht. Und sein erstes Projekt seit diesem Verlust heute eröffnet. Wieder in Deutschland und wieder ist es Stoff, aus dem der Traum gemacht ist. Nur diesmal hat Christo von innen verpackt, berichtet Ute Pauling.
Ätherisch schön, in diffuses Weiß getaucht, immer ganz zart in Bewegung, so präsentiert sich der weite Raum, den Christo für den Gasometer in Oberhausen entwarf. Sphärisch die Anmutung des Ballons, die Außenhülle wie von Himmelskörpern beleuchtet. Nach gut 10 Wochen Aufbau wurde heute das Innere wie ein Geheimnis gelüftet. Christo, der Künstler, hatte 2010, ein Jahr nach dem Tod seiner Frau Jean-Claude, mit diesem Großprojekt begonnen. Die Wirkung auf den Besucher des Riesenluftballons, Air Package genannt, ist genau kalkuliert. Dennoch, sagt er, jede Interpretation ist zulässig, jeder darf sehen, was er sehen will. An seiner Seite Projektleiter Wolfgang Volz. Seit Jahrzehnten setzt er zuverlässig um, was Christo im Atelier entwickelt. Das Ergebnis lässt ihn selbst staunen.
Für mich ist es ein Gefühl, als ob ich den Himmel schon frühzeitig erreicht hätte. Wenn ich mir vorstellen könnte, wie es im Himmel ist, das trifft das hier.
12 Kilometer himmlischer Stoffe hat er beschafft, vom Zuschnitt und der Fertigung bis hin zur Installation der gigantischen Hülle. Volz hatte seine Augen überall. Zum Team gehörten erfahrene Ballonfahrer und Bauer, alle pragmatisch und ohne Höhenängste. Generalstabsmäßig wuchs das Package gen Himmel, 90 Meter hoch, 50 Meter in der Breite, bis ein Gebläse es mit Luft prall füllte. Eine Riesenluftnummer witzelten Journalisten schon vor der Eröffnung. Aber im Gegensatz zu anderen Mammutprojekten gab es hier keine Widerstände. Das Big Air Package gehört zu den 22 gelungenen Projekten des 77-jährigen Christo. Viele konnten nicht verwirklicht werden. Und Christo will weiterarbeiten. Der Gasometer ist mittlerweile ein Publikumsmagnet. Das 1,4 Millionen Euro teure Kunstwerk soll sich bis Dezember bezahlt machen.
About 2.5 hours ago, the 6 crew members gathered together in the small vestibule connecting the Soyuz spacecraft and the Poisk module for one final opportunity to say farewell to one another and to offer their best wishes to the departing crew of Ford, Novitsky, and Tarelkin before they entered their Soyuz vehicle to close the hatches and begin the preparations for the undocking that is coming up shortly, leading to a landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan at 10:05 p.m. Central Time tonight. As you can see from this video, again, the hatches between the two spacecraft were closed at 3:38 p.m. Central Time, 4:38 p.m. Eastern Time. The final farewells taking place as the departing crew made their way into their Soyuz vehicle to begin their final preparations. Once the hatches were closed between the two spacecraft, the vestibule, this small passageway between the docking interface between the Soyuz and Poisk was depressurized. Leak checks got underway almost immediately. The crew then received approval from Russian flight controllers at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside Moscow to don their Russian Sokol launch and entry suits. That took about 40 minutes to complete. They then strapped themselves into their respective seats in the descent module, the centermost section of the 3-compartment Soyuz vehicle. They strapped themselves in with Tarelkin on the left seat, Novitsky in the center, and Ford on the right. The suits underwent their own brand of leak checks. They are airtight, as is the vestibule and the docking interface between the two vehicles. About 25 minutes ago, the International Space Station maneuvered into the undocking orientation. The crew reported it was in great shape and ready to begin the journey home for a landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan a few hours from now. Once again, this is video that was recorded about 2.5 hours ago as the crew members, the departing crew of Novitsky, Tarelkin, and Ford said goodbye to the Expedition 35 crew, soon to be a 3-man crew on their own for the next 2 weeks. Commander Chris Hadfield, NASA flight engineer Tom Marshburn, and Russian flight engineer Roman Romanenko. There were final pictures taken, as you can see. Some final exchanges of words and well wishes from the remaining crew on board of Hadfield, Romanenko, and Marshburn to the departing crew. The crew entering the Soyuz, in fact, enters into what is known as the orbital module, the uppermost compartment of the Soyuz that contains the facilities and some legroom for the crew members to stretch out a bit, as well as the forward docking mechanism that will be powered up just a short time before the undocking here that's coming up in just 22 minutes. Once the crew made its way past the orbital module, they made their way into the centermost section, the descent module, closed the hatch to the upper section, the orbital module, and then began that series of leak checks as part of the preparations for the undocking that is coming up a short time from now. As we watch the replay of the farewells and hatch closure that took place 2.5 hours ago, the International Space Station is currently flying 254 statute miles above the Earth, moving just off the eastern coast of Africa in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator, moving from southwest to northeast. And now you can see the closing of the hatches as Roman Romanenko was assisted by his crewmate Tom Marshburn in closing the hatch. And as we said, that ensued a series of leak checks and suit checks as the departing Soyuz crew climbed into their Sokol launch and entry suits and made their way into the descent module to strap themselves into their seats. Over the past 2.5 hours, communications checks and systems checks have been conducted. Everything has been found to be in good shape with the Soyuz vehicle in preparation for its return to Earth. The crew in a very upbeat and jovial mood, often catnapping at times, relaxing and getting ready for the high-speed return to Earth that will result in a touchdown on the steppe of Kazakhstan, about 36 statute miles to the northeast of the remote town of Arkelik at 10:05 p.m. Central Time this evening.
Okay, the capture is no LED, is no... no
Physical separation confirmed at 6:43 p.m. Central Time over northeastern Mongolia.
Indicator LED is off, and combined GSO is confirmed. Okay, guys. Good luck. Thank you, Roman. Bye-bye. You remember Kevin's request? Of course.
Ford, Nowitzki, Turelkin
1 minute elapsed.
departing the facility that has been their home for the past 5 months.
Docking port is clear. No foreign object.
Down the longitudinal axis of the Russian segment of the International Space Station at the crosshairs, that's the ISS Progress 49 vehicle, which will remain attached to the aft end of the Zvezda service module for about a month. Soyuz commander Oleg Nowitzki, with the call sign of Kazbek,
Are off. Accelerometer LED
will now
on either. Repress is also
put commands into the onboard computer to initiate the descent mode, basically the load of software on the Soyuz computers that govern descent operations. Good evening and welcome back to the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, where at this hour the journey of Kevin Ford of NASA and Russian cosmonauts Oleg Nowitzki and Evgeny Turelkin is in the final act, as they are prepared for a deorbit burn just 27.5 minutes from now in their Soyuz TMA-06M spacecraft that will begin the journey home to wrap up 144 days in space, 142 days aboard the International Space Station, and a journey of almost 61 million miles spanning 2,304 orbits of the Earth. Everything is in readiness for the homecoming of Ford, Nowitzki, and Turelkin as the Soyuz, now almost 12 kilometers away from the International Space Station, from which it undocked 2 hours ago at 6:43 p.m. Central Time. The Soyuz has moved into a position for the 4-minute, 44-second retrograde firing of the Soyuz engines that will begin a 53-minute journey home and a landing on a frigid steppe of Kazakhstan, 36 miles to the northeast of the remote town of Arkelik. Some 5 hours ago at 3:38 p.m. Central Time, the departing Expedition 34 crew and the remaining Expedition 35 crew members had an opportunity to say farewell to one another in the small passageway linking the Soyuz TMA-06M spacecraft with the Poisk module on the space-facing side of the Zvezda service module on the Russian segment of the International Space Station. As the crew members said goodbye to one another, it set the stage for the closing of the hatches and the beginning of the journey home for Ford, Novitsky, and Tarelkin, who were launched back on October 23rd last year from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, arriving on board the International Space Station on October 25th. As you can see in this replay of the video from 5 hours ago, the departing crew made its way into the hatchway to the orbital module, the upper portion of the three-section Soyuz spacecraft, after which they had an opportunity to say a few final words to one another before closing the hatch and beginning the process of leak checks that resulted in an airtight seal and the depressurization of the vestibule, the small passageway that you're seeing between the Soyuz and Poisk, before they donned their Sokol launch and entry suits, conducted leak checks of those suits in the precursor to the actual undocking that took place a couple of hours later. Once again, you're seeing the final farewells as Oleg Novitsky, you can see in the hatchway the Soyuz commander wiping down the hatchway to make sure that no debris would interfere with the closing of the hatches and the leak checks that would ensue. The crew members saying final farewells to one another. The Expedition 35 crew on the space station side of the docking interface now left as a three-man crew with Expedition 35 Commander Chris Hadfield of the Canadian Space Agency, his NASA flight engineer crewmate Tom Marshburn, and Russian cosmonaut Roman Romanenko, who will be a three-man crew for the next 2 weeks until the launch of Pavel Vinogradov, Chris Cassidy, and Alexander Mazurkin in the wee hours of March 29th, 2 weeks from today, as they begin their journey to the International Space Station on a single-day launch to docking, expedited fast track of 4 orbits in 6 hours from launch to docking. They will join up with Hatfield, Romanenko, and Marshburn to re-up to a 6-man crew on board the International Outpost and Expedition 35. Again, this is video that was captured at 3:38 p.m. Central Time this afternoon, about 5 hours ago, as the crew members said farewell to one another before closing the hatches between the Soyuz TMA-06M spacecraft and the Poisk module to begin the preparations for undocking. Romanenko on the left in the red shirt, and Chris Hadfield snapping final photos of his crewmates before the closing of the hatch that you'll see just a moment from now. As you watch this replay, we now are hearing that the sun is rising at the landing site. It is dawn at the landing site on the steppe of Kazakhstan, and we'll talk about the helicopter deployments for the search and recovery forces in just a moment. But the sun is beginning to rise at the landing site. It is extremely cold. The temperature is hovering just over 0 degrees Fahrenheit at this hour. The sunrise and the sun expected to warm the landing site by a few degrees, but it is going to be very, very frigid conditions for Ford, Novitsky, and Tarelkin at landing. Now you see the hatches being closed and secured on the station side of the docking interface. A similar hatch closure took place on the Soyuz side of the docking interface and the commencement of leak checks to ensure that we had an airtight seal between the two docking interfaces prior to undocking. With all of those leak checks having been accomplished and the crew having climbed into their Sokol launch and entry suits, the command was given at 6:40 p.m. Central Time to begin hooks unlatching from the docking interface on the Poisk module, and at 6:43 p.m. springs on both sides of the docking interface pushed off against one another to enable physical separation of the Soyuz from the Poisk module docking port to which it had been attached since October 25th. 3 minutes after physical separation, 2 thrusters on the Soyuz fired for 15 seconds in a separation burn that enabled the Soyuz to begin to phase away from the station to the point at which it is now about 12 kilometers away for the deorbit burn that is scheduled 20 minutes and 30 seconds from now. And again, this video from an external camera on the Soyuz vehicle as it departed the International Space Station that had been the home for Ford, Nowitzki, and Turelkin for 142 days. Again, that was video of the undocking from an external television camera on the Soyuz as the TMA-06M and its 3 passengers, Ford, Nowitzki, and Turelkin, flying under the call sign of Kazbek that you'll hear referenced very frequently during the VHF audio conversations between Russian flight controllers at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside Moscow and the crew as they descend for their landing over the course of the next hour and 12 minutes. Kazbek, the name of one of the major mountains of the Caucasus, that mountain range located between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, that call sign selected by Soyuz Commander Oleg Nowitzki. Down at the landing site in Kazakhstan, as we mentioned, the sun beginning to rise. That should warm the landing site temperatures just a bit. However, the current forecast calls for very clear skies. You can see this radar imagery, the circle representing the landing target for the Soyuz TMA-06M spacecraft and its 3 crew members, Ford, Nowitzki, and Turelkin, with landing scheduled just 1 hour, 11 minutes from now. The fog and freezing rain that delayed landing by 24 hours passed to the east of the landing site overnight, enabling helicopters to deploy from the prime staging city of Kustanai, Kazakhstan, just across the border from Russia, that you can see here in this landing map. They flew in the wee hours Friday morning U.S. time from Kustanai down to Arkalyk and further to the west to pre-stage at a ballistic landing site that would be employed in the highly unlikely event that a problem with the Soyuz vehicle during entry would cause it to fall short, well short of its intended landing target. That landing target in the bullseye that you see is about 36 miles to the northeast of Arkalyk. And at this hour, other helicopters, the final quartet of helicopters deploying from Kustanai, are airborne. Their departure back-timed so that they arrive in the vicinity of the landing site right around the time the Soyuz will arrive as well under its main parachute. Other helicopters are expected to deploy in the next 25 minutes or so from Arkalyk itself, where they have spent, their crew members and members of the landing team have spent the night. Those helicopters will be airborne in about 25 minutes for a 30-minute flight, a much shorter flight, to the prime landing site. The bottom line is that 8 out of the 12 helicopters associated with tonight's recovery operations will converge around the vicinity of the landing site to the northeast of Arkalyk at the time that the Soyuz is within view under its main chute. Just a few minutes before its landing, those helicopters will be circling around the landing zone in an oval-shaped racetrack pattern as they wait for the arrival of the Soyuz under its main chute. 2 other helicopters, Russian Mi-8 helicopters, are being dispatched dispatched midway between the prime landing site and the ballistic landing zone so that they may fly in either direction depending on the disposition of the Soyuz's entry track, which moves from southwest to northeast toward the prime landing site itself. And the final two helicopters in this choreographed scenario tonight are to the far west at the western edge of the ballistic landing zone in the unlikely event, as we said, that they would come into play for tonight's recovery operations. In addition to the dozen helicopters in play, there are 3 fixed-wing aircraft, including a large Antonov 24 aircraft that you see in this picture in the upper right-hand corner. That Antonov aircraft serves as a flying command and relay center, if you will, that the Russian search and recovery forces, known as Rosaviatsia, use to relay data and communications from the Soyuz crew when they approach the landing site itself. All of that data and communications relayed back to the Russian flight control team at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside Moscow. You're looking at a live view from a balcony camera overlooking the International Space Station Flight Control Room in Korolyov. In addition, there are a half dozen all-terrain vehicles poised at the landing site itself, which will move into proximity of the capsule to begin the process of providing imagery from the landing site. We hope for live video of the crew being extracted from the Soyuz once it has landed and it is safe to approach the vehicle itself. The crew will be extracted one by one from the Soyuz vehicle. The commander, Novitsky, is extracted first, followed by, we think, in the order that it usually goes in, by Yevgeny Tarelkin from the left seat, and finally Kevin Ford from the right seat of the descent module itself. Those all-terrain vehicles will be standing by as the 3 crew members are placed in reclining chairs and bundled up against the extreme cold at the landing site itself tonight, which is Saturday morning Kazakhstan time. One by one, the crew members will be raised in those reclining chairs and brought into an inflatable medical tent nearby that will be erected by RSC and Nergia personnel who are working in conjunction with the search and recovery forces this evening. They will be brought into that inflatable medical tent, which is heated so that they can get out of those bulky Sokol launch and entry suits and into more comfortable flight clothing. They'll be administered to initial medical exams by a team of flight surgeons on hand, representing each of the 3 crew members, including a NASA team of flight surgeons accompanying the NASA delegation, along with the search and recovery forces participating in tonight's recovery operations. Once the crew is deemed fit and ready to fly back to the staging city of Kustanai, they'll be brought one by one into all-terrain vehicles that will drive them a short distance to 3 individual helicopters that will take off for the 2-hour flight back to the staging city of Kustanai, Kazakhstan. In Kustanai, Kevin Ford will say goodbye for the time being to his 2 Russian colleagues, Novitsky and Tarelkin. He will board a NASA plane for the flight back to Houston. Novitsky and Tarelkin will board a Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center plane for the flight back to Chkalovsky Airfield, a military air base just outside of their training base at Star City, Russia. The International Space Station and the Soyuz TMA-06M are currently flying across the South Pacific at an altitude of 254 statute miles, soon to cross the southern tip of Chile and southern Argentina, back across the southern Atlantic Ocean, where the 2 vehicles will begin a southwest to northeasterly traverse across the southern Atlantic and across the equator. Again, we are just 12 minutes away from the deorbit burn, 1 hour, 5 minutes away from the landing of the Soyuz on the steppe of Kazakhstan. Right now, the forecast for landing time is for nearly pristine conditions cloud-wise. Only a few clouds at 1,000 feet are expected, and again, you're looking at this radar imagery. There are some clouds to the south and to the southeast of the landing site in Kazakhstan, but right at that bullseye target that the Soyuz hopes to make it down to, there are perfectly clear skies here, and we're just about 20 minutes after sunrise now as the sun is rising at the landing site. We're expecting light winds about 7 miles an hour out of the southeast, extremely cold temperatures that will be greeting the crew, temperatures in the low teens at best, with a wind chill factor around 0 degrees Fahrenheit. The deorbit burn that is to be executed less than 11 minutes from now is a 4-minute, 44-second braking maneuver, a retrograde maneuver, if you will, to decelerate the orbit of the Soyuz by 128 meters per second, enabling it to drop out of orbit to begin the descent back toward the Earth's atmosphere. The 3 sections of the Soyuz will pyrotechnically separate at 9:39 p.m. Central Time. Only the descent module survives the reentry. It will reach the upper traces of the Earth's atmosphere at 9:42 p.m., heading for the landing site. The command to open up the parachutes will be given at 9:51 p.m. First, a drogue chute will be deployed, followed by the deployment of the main chute of the Soyuz, which will be canted at an angle once the main chute is deployed. The Soyuz then will be heading for the landing site just a few seconds before touchdown. Soft landing engines will initiate a firing for a final braking maneuver, with touchdown expected at 10:05 p.m. Central Time, 9:05 a.m. Kazakhstan time on Saturday morning, about an hour and 23 minutes after sunrise. About 40 minutes ago, on the communications loops up to the Soyuz vehicle following undocking, the head of the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center, veteran cosmonaut Sergei Grikolov, who has spent more time in space than any other human being, voiced up his best wishes to Novitsky, Tarelkin, and Ford, saying, have a good ride home. We'll see you back in Moscow. Ford, Novitsky, and Tarelkin flying their Soyuz under the call sign of Kazbek, chosen by Novitsky, the Soyuz commander, who is strapped into the center seat of the descent module in the center section of the 3-section Soyuz spacecraft, flanked on his left by board engineer Tarelkin, and on his right by Kevin Ford, the Expedition 34 commander, who handed over command of the International Space Station on Wednesday to Canadian Space Agency astronaut Chris Hadfield, Hadfield becoming the first Canadian commander of the International Laboratory. At the time of undocking, Expedition 35 began officially. The increments measured from undocking to undocking in the space station bylaws. The International Space Station and the Soyuz now approaching the southern coast of Chile, about to cross Chile into Argentina and back out over the South Atlantic.
Fan off, indicator on. Copy.
For Roman. Moscow SSG1. Page 13, inaudible.
Сбой почетности 0.
MLK 0.
We're now 6.5 minutes away from the start of the deorbit burn. Again, a 4-minute, 44-second braking maneuver, the firing of the Soyuz engines to begin to slow the orbital speed of the Soyuz down and enabling Earth's gravity to capture the vehicle as it drops out of the Earth's atmosphere.
Go ahead, Roman. I didn't call you, but there is an MLK mishap and inaudible. Come again. Step 7-3. Step 7-3. I need to report every minute the state of Aru. I'm reporting inaudible. Copy.
Here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at Mission Control in Houston, the Orbit 3 team of flight controllers on duty working in tandem with their Russian counterparts at their control center outside of Moscow. The Orbit 3 team here in Houston, led by Flight Director Mike Sarafin at this hour, joined on console to Sarafin's right in the blue shirt. That's spacecraft communicator Rob Hayhurst, who's talking directly with the space station crew of Hatfield, Romanenko, and Tom Marshburn. And to Hayhurst's right is Japanese astronaut Satoshi Furukawa, a veteran of half a year on the International Space Station, who is here to provide his expertise on Soyuz systems if required.
We are expecting a detailed report.
Members of Kevin Ford's family are here in the viewing room in the ISS flight control room here at the Johnson Space Center, as they will watch along with the rest of us all of the activities involved with the return of Ford and his crewmates to a landing on a frigid steppe of Kazakhstan just 57 minutes from now. We're 4 minutes away from the deorbit burn that will start the journey home for Ford, Novitsky, and Tarelkin. This crew wrapping up 144 days in space since their launch back on October 23rd.
Moscow, SS SG1 for Roman. Yes, Roman, go ahead. As per the radiogram, it's step 7-3. I should report the status inaudible every minute. Give you the percentage and the MLK failures as well. There are zeros. That's why I'm not going to bother you every minute. If there are any changes or deviations, I'm going to let you know. Otherwise, so far, everything is nominal, so I'm not going to report you every minute because that would make no sense. It would be just garbage. All right, very good. Now you have zeros. As soon as anything changes, let us know. Yes, everything is stable now. There are zeros, and as soon as there is a malfunction, I'm going to let you know.
Now 3 minutes away from the deorbit burn, the International Space Station and the Soyuz TMA-06M spacecraft tracking from southwest to northeast across the southwestern Atlantic Ocean.
And there are zero errors, so I'm going to go ahead and proceed. All right, we copy.
Flight controllers at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov exhorting the Soyuz crew to keep them informed, keep talking, keep providing status reports. We mentioned this in our previous broadcast, but it's worth repeating that because of the altitude of the International Space Station, 254 statute miles, and the so-called look angle of the Soyuz antennas to the S-band communication system of the station itself during the Soyuz's return to Earth, there is enough distance between the Soyuz and the station as it plunges back into the Earth's atmosphere that communications could be choppy or non-existent from time to time during the time that the Soyuz enters the Earth's atmosphere, prior to the time that it is acquired by that Antonov fixed-wing aircraft that is a flying command and relay station, if you will, near the landing site to the northeast of Arkalyk, Kazakhstan. Coming up on the 90-second mark to the start of the deorbit burn. And this unique view of the Soyuz TMA-06M from International Space Station cameras. 1 minute till the deorbit burn.
Interference.
"15 seconds until the deorbit burn. All quiet here in the flight control room. The visiting vehicle officer reports that the deorbit burn is underway.
Kazbek, Mission Control Moscow.
Once again, a 4-minute, 44-second retrograde firing of the Soyuz engines to slow the vehicle down, enabling it to drop out of orbit for its descent back into the Earth's atmosphere.
Kazbek, Moscow. If you hear me, please keep push to talk button on. 45, 30 meters burn. 3 seconds. 12, 16 and a half, and 150. 1 minute and 30 seconds now. 40 meters. 1 minute, 41 meters, 0.45 load.
Soyuz Commander Oleg Novitsky reporting the progress of the deorbit burn to flight controllers at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov.
And 16.5 for propellant.
–
2 minutes, acceleration 0.46, 54 meters, nominal propellant use, 3 seconds, bias 13.5.
About 10 seconds after the completion of the deorbit burn, the upper section of the Soyuz, known as the orbital module, will be automatically depressurized. This is the first step on the road to the pyrotechnic separation of the modules that will take place shortly before the Soyuz descent module, in which the crew is strapped in, begins to enter the Earth's atmosphere.
Meters by 4 seconds, 12.8, pressure bottle 124, 16.5 for propellant. 252, 77.8 by 4. Ninety-four minutes. 94 meters should be 4 minutes. 5 seconds difference delta. 3.5 minutes, 0.47 acceleration, 96 meters burn, 4 seconds delta, 12.8, and for propellant 16.9, and pressure button 108. Four minutes, 109 meters, 0.47 acceleration, nominal propellant use, difference 4 seconds, 12.9, pressure button 99, 16.8 propellant, and we're getting ready for the activation of the thruster. For 30.47 acceleration, 125 meters. Deactivation of thruster. Copy. Thermal sensors off. There's the below opening. Separation PGT. Perfect. It's the fourth. Parameters are in. This third one is PGT pressure on IPA falling.
This is Mission Control Houston. The deorbit burn is complete, and the reports from the Russian Mission Control Center are that it was a nominal burn. Kevin Ford, Oleg Novitsky, and Yevgeny Tarelkin are on their way home.
Sensors on.
We're now receiving
350 in the orbit.
reports from the field that an influx of low clouds now is beginning to move in toward the landing site. That is causing some deteriorating visibility at the landing site. Helicopters that had been deployed earlier from Kustanai en route to the landing site have been directed to return to the staging city of Kustanai.
Checking.
Please confirm that
Personnel are on their way to the landing site via ground transportation. That would be in the form of all-terrain vehicles. So we'll be standing by for additional information on the disposition of recovery forces to get to the crew.
200 in orbital below. Stable in the
Again, earlier throughout the day, the weather was clear in the vicinity of the landing site to the northeast of the town of Arkalyk, but some lingering low clouds associated with the passage of a frontal system and a low pressure system and a cold front that prevented landing 24 hours ago. Some of those clouds have been reintroduced toward the landing site. You're looking at some radar imagery, and as a result, the Russian Search and Recovery Forces, Rosaviatsa, is amending the deployment of its helicopters on the fly here. So we'll stand by for further word on exactly how many helicopters will arrive at the landing site and the disposition of ground transportation that will be waiting for the crew to arrive once it lands just 45 minutes from now. The Soyuz is on its way home. Everything is in excellent shape with the vehicle itself. All systems reported to be in great shape. Soyuz Commander Oleg Novitsky reporting no issues whatsoever, the deorbit burn having been executed in flawless fashion. The next step is about 19 minutes from now. That will be the pyrotechnic separation of the three sections of the Soyuz to enable the descent module, the center section of the Soyuz spacecraft, to make its way towards atmospheric entry, the first traces of the Earth's atmosphere that will occur at an altitude of about 336,000 feet.
Kevin, intros will be earlier. And after Kupol, we will do it special tightening belt now. Okay.
Понимаю. Understand.
Так, передний 5:33, 59.
5:53:59. 12 minutes.
Давление в БУ 30.
35 in the orbital compartment, low pressure.
Давление в БУ
20 is the pressure in the orbital compartment, low. And defense module stable?
Высота 170
Yes.
на левом инфу.
Checking on the left input.
Принято.
Same. Copy.
Подержу еще. Ну, как-то так. Спасибо.
Just like this, thank you.
This is Mission Control Houston. Kevin Ford, Yevgeny Turelkin, and Soyuz Commander Oleg Novitsky at the controls of the Soyuz TMA-06M spacecraft as it heads for the next milestone on the road home to landing in the steppe of Kazakhstan, northeast of the town of Arkalyk. The next milestone to occur about 15 minutes from now. That would be the pyrotechnic separation of the three sections of the Soyuz, the orbital module, the top section, the instrumentation and propulsion module, is the rear section, and in the middle, in the descent module, strapped into their respective seats, is Soyuz Commander Novitsky in the center seat, NASA's Kevin Ford in the right seat, and in the left seat, board engineer Yevgeny Turelkin. The weather, which delayed landing by 24 hours with the passage of a cold front and fog and freezing rain just about 24 hours ago, yielded to clear skies over Kazakhstan, but the weather has been a bit dynamic, and as you can see from this radar, low clouds and fog have formed in the vicinity of the landing site, and as a result, a number of the helicopters that had been deployed from Kustanai were directed to return to the staging city. Some of the helicopters pre-staged in the early morning hours and the wee hours U.S. time on Friday that are now pre-staged in Arkalyk have been instructed to remain on the ground for the time being. Selected personnel, as the reports are indicating, have begun to travel to the landing site via ground transportation. And the latest report from one of the helicopters that is headed out of Kustanai to refuel in Arkalyk for a potential flight onto the landing zone reports thick, low fog with an estimate of visibility of about 100 feet at ground level. So the Russian search and recovery forces, who are masters at this type of operation in all types of weather, are choreographing real-time amendments to the landing plan in the safest and most efficient way possible to reach the crew in the most expedited fashion so that they can begin to extract the crew in the shortest time possible once the Soyuz has touched down. So we'll be standing by to bring you reports as we receive them from the landing site and from the crew itself as it talks ultimately to one of the Antonov fixed-wing aircraft that is flying in the vicinity of the landing site itself, pre-staged at the landing site to act as a command and relay center, if you will, to relay both data and voice communications back to the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow.
13 minutes to separation. Confirming.
Напомню вам, репортаж вести.
Just a reminder, please keep reporting.
Подробный репортаж.
In detail.
Понял.
Copy.
Что входит в подробный репортаж, кроме всех параметров?
On all parameters appear on board documentation.
The meteorological combination of the passage of this low pressure system, actually a series of cold fronts that moved through the steppe of Kazakhstan over the past few days, and the extremely cold temperatures. It is now going on an hour after sunrise. The sun having obviously a tough time making its way to burn off the fog and low clouds because of the dew point that is formed in the vicinity of the landing site. So the search and recovery forces are assessing the weather. They're managing with the helicopter pilots flying those Russian Mi-8 recovery helicopters. They're making real-time calls on the disposition of helicopters and all-terrain vehicles that are being dispatched in order to make it to the landing site for as expeditious an extraction of the crew from the Soyuz vehicle as possible after the Soyuz touches down. Landing scheduled just 36 minutes from now.
Copy. The right input shows 782. It's quite a difference. Yes, it's a fairly big difference.
А на input 2 какое давление?
What's the pressure on input 2? 782.
Принято 782.
Copy 782.
We're about 9 minutes away from the separation of the modules. That will occur at an altitude of 87 miles. Module separation will be followed about 2.5 minutes later by the Soyuz hitting the first traces of the Earth's atmosphere at an altitude of 336,000 feet. At that point, Kevin Ford, Yevgeny Tarelkin, and Oleg Novitsky will feel the first tug of gravity at their bodies in 144 days. You're looking at animation of what ultimately will be the deployment of the drogue and main chutes on the Soyuz vehicle to enable it to descend to its landing site to the northeast of the town of Arkalyk. A few seconds before touchdown, the soft landing engines will fire in a final braking maneuver to cushion the impact of the Soyuz against the ground. The International Space Station is currently crossing the west coast of Africa, moving from southwest to northeast. The Soyuz slightly in front of the International Space Station at this moment as it descends towards entry interface, preceded by the separation of the modules that will occur about 7.5 minutes from now.
Разбейте, можете.
Казбек.
Машина.
Inaudible.
И автоматику
Copy. We are closing the helmets. You can close the helmets. The helmets, yes. We are closing it.
The closing of the helmets is a routine procedure in advance of the pyrotechnic separation of the three sections of the Soyuz.
Kevin, did you close the helmet? Yes.
And again, communications between the Russian Mission Control Center and the Soyuz always somewhat choppy as it makes its way towards the traces of the Earth's atmosphere. At this hour, the Soyuz TMA-06M and its three crewmates passing over northern Africa, soon to pass over the Mediterranean as the Soyuz targets
5 minutes before separation.
its landing site 36 miles to the northeast of Arkelik, a landing site that now appears to be somewhat embedded in fog and low clouds after a clear day in Kazakhstan, a clear evening in Kazakhstan in the overnight hours that were in stark contrast to the fog and freezing rain of 24 hours ago that delayed this landing by a day. The weather conditions and the influx of fog and low clouds over the course of the last 45 minutes to an hour has resulted in some of the search and recovery helicopters either being held in place in the staging town of Arkelik or being requested to turn around from their transit en route from the staging city of Kustanai just across the Russian border to try to avoid as many helicopters flying in reduced visibility as possible. This is not an uncommon practice on the part of the search and recovery forces who evaluate weather right up until the time of the Soyuz touchdown to determine the ultimate disposition of helicopters and ground support transportation to reach the crew in the most expeditious fashion.
Три минуты до разделения.
3 minutes before separation.
Повторите, сколько минут до разделения?
Say it again.
3 минуты до разделения.
3 minutes before separation.
Soyuz Commander Oleg Novitsky confirming through flight controllers of the Russian Mission Control Center that we are coming up on the point of the module separation. The orbital module, the top section.
Go ahead, Roman.
Урывками принимаем, но разобрать можно.
We can understand what you're saying with a very small dropout. We have
And okay.
2 minutes, 40 seconds before separation. Copy.
Is that correct?
Да, в 2:30.
2:30. It's starting with 2:36. Yes, 2:36. Copy.
For
MLK 100%. Between 60% and 100% floating, and for parity it's about 40. 40, 50, okay, copy.
The module separation will be conducted pyrotechnically on automatic computer command.
Program confirmed, controlled descent confirmed. Copy.
The Soyuz is now more than 200 kilometers away from the International Space Station as it descends toward the Earth's atmosphere. That is beyond the limit of guaranteed space-to-space voice communications through the VHF system relayed through antennas on the International Space Station.
Есть
Radar confirmed. Boost 2 confirmed. Copy.
Все тангенты должны быть отжаты.
All PGTs must be released. Transmission buttons
Без фиксатора.
deactivated. We are talking on push to talk without restrainer.
Reports from one of the helicopters deployed from Kustanai, the staging city, toward the landing site indicates that they are pressing ahead toward the landing site. Again, it is up to the search and recovery forces to determine which helicopters are able to fly through reduced visibility and which need to turn around toward their landing site. Some of the helicopters may remain on the ground in Arkalyk, and some may press ahead to the landing site. It is not uncommon for the crew to be recovered in an expeditious fashion if visibility or other weather factors prevent all of the helicopters from arriving at the landing site. First and foremost, safety of the crew and the recovery of the crew in the most expeditious fashion.
Suspects Moscow. Suspects, Mission Control Moscow. Suspects, MCC Moscow, how copy? Suspects Moscow, how copy?
Flight controllers at the Russian Mission Control Center attempting to call the crew on board the Soyuz to confirm module separation.
Suspects Moscow. Suspects Moscow.
Once again, a reminder, not at all unusual for no communications
Suspects Moscow.
between the flight control team in Moscow at the Russian Mission Control Center and the Soyuz spacecraft as it prepares to enter the Earth's atmosphere. This is typical, particularly with the altitude that the International Space Station is currently flying at these days, and the range and the look angle between the Soyuz antennas and the station to relay VHF communications.
Mission Control Moscow, we could copy you, but it's very strong interference. Inaudible. Suspects, Mission Control Moscow, how copy? Suspects, Mission Control Moscow.
The Soyuz at this point has begun its entry into the Earth's atmosphere. One report from the Russian Mission Control Center from snippets of telemetry being received there indicates a normal separation of the Soyuz modules. However, this has not been confirmed by voice from the crew on board the Soyuz.
Казбек, МСC Moscow.
As the Soyuz continues to make its way toward its landing site northeast of Arkelik, we're about 20 minutes and 30 seconds away from its expected touchdown time.
Mission Control Moscow.
Again, the communications are expected to improve as the Soyuz approaches the landing site within range of this Antonov fixed-wing aircraft in the proximity of the landing zone itself. Time to touchdown, 19 minutes. The Soyuz well within the Earth's atmosphere as G-forces will begin to build up shortly for Ford, Nowitzki, and Turelkin. About 3 minutes from now, we should be at the point where the 3 crew members in the descent module will experience maximum G-forces of about 3 to 4 Gs. That will be followed about 2 minutes later by the command to open parachutes. Once again, you're seeing an animation of what would be the final minutes of the Soyuz's descent into the Earth's atmosphere, the deployment of the parachutes, and the final maneuver, a braking rocket maneuver, the soft landing engines firing just seconds before touchdown. The introduction of low clouds and fog into the area over the past hour and a half as an offspring of the fronts that have moved through Kazakhstan over the past few days, and the dew point that's being experienced at the moment with temperatures hovering just over the 0 mark Fahrenheit. All of those meteorological factors
Kazbek, MCC Moscow.
have created a situation where some of the recovery helicopters being deployed from Kustanai were ordered to return to the staging city. Other helicopters much closer to the landing site in the town of Arkelik are still on the ground, have not been instructed to take off yet. But the report from the search and recovery forces indicates that a minimum and requisite number of helicopters are at the landing site, flying in a circular pattern to await the arrival of the Soyuz spacecraft. These would consist of the most critical personnel to tend to the Soyuz vehicle and its crew members following touchdown. So some of the helicopters are already at the landing site. This is not unusual for only a partial contingent of helicopters to be deployed to create an efficiency and the most expeditious recovery of the crew once the Soyuz has touched down.
Integral 19. The G loads are decreasing 453, roll 0. Integral 18. We are descending per the profile curve. G loads 3.6. Roll minus 45. Integral 16. Marker approaches to the lower edge of Vado.
And through ground sites now, the crew is talking directly to the Russian Mission Control Center, reporting status. Everything is in good shape on board the Soyuz vehicle. G-forces are beginning to decrease as we come up on about a minute away from the command to open the parachutes. Time to touchdown, 15 minutes. So despite some of the weather conditions deteriorating at the landing site, the news is all good from inside the Soyuz spacecraft. The Soyuz right where it's supposed to be. One of the helicopters in which the Director of Human Spaceflight Operations for Russia for NASA, Mike Serber, and NASA Public Affairs Officer Josh Byerly on board. They are over the landing site, so they made it from Kustanai toward the landing site. Again, this is hit and miss when it comes to which helicopters make it and which don't. If the weather conditions don't permit a full contingent of helicopters to make it to the landing site, the most critical personnel are on station, ready to support landing just 14 minutes from now. The search and recovery forces at the landing site have good two-way communications with the crew. We're not hearing it through the VHF communication system at the moment from the Soyuz, but at last communication, all of the communications were in good shape and everything going well as we approach the 13-minute mark toward touchdown. Still awaiting confirmation of the deployment of the parachutes. NASA Public Affairs Officer Josh Byerly has sent an image taken from outside one of the porthole windows on his helicopter. The clouds are fairly thick over the landing site with the sun above that deck of clouds as they circle around the landing site. The report now from the search and recovery forces indicating that the crew is feeling very well as we approach the 12-minute mark to touchdown.
Inaudible.
The Soyuz radio beacon being picked up by the search and recovery forces. That's a very good sign. Everything seems to be in good shape. That radio beacon, along with the Soyuz equipped with global positioning system capability, all of that providing range and position information to the Antonov fixed-wing aircraft and other search and recovery forces assets in the vicinity of the landing site. 10 minutes until touchdown. The Soyuz should be descending under its main parachute. And we are expecting momentarily, if everything is proceeding according to schedule, the jettisoning of the heat shield on the Soyuz. That will expose the altimeter. That will provide the Soyuz with altitude information in the final minutes before touchdown. The search and recovery forces now confirming they have a good visual on the descent module. Everything is in good shape. We are less than 10 minutes away from touchdown. The jettisoning of the heat shield also exposes the soft landing engines that will fire just a few seconds off the ground to provide one final braking maneuver and cushion the impact of landing for the 3 crew members who are in the descent module. Oleg Novitsky in the center seat, flanked on his left by Yevgeny Tarelkin, and on his right by NASA's Kevin Ford.
Inaudible. Try one more time.
We are less than 8 minutes away from the expected touchdown of the Soyuz TMA-06M to bring Ford, Novitsky, and Tarelkin home after 144 days in space and a journey of almost 61 million miles. Reports from the search and recovery forces now indicate that the Soyuz is at an altitude of about 3,700 meters, descending on its exact descent profile toward the landing site about 36 miles to the northeast of Arkalyk.
The crew feels good. 2,000 altitude at 15,000. They'll be following you.
2.5 minutes before touchdown, the Soyuz passing through 2,000 meters in altitude. Oleg Novitsky, the Soyuz commander, reporting it feels good.
Interference.
As we wait for further reports relayed through the search and recovery forces, we are approaching the 4-minute mark towards touchdown. Search and recovery helicopters, the most essential helicopters, including the personnel that will be responsible for safing the Soyuz vehicle and extracting the crew, as well as in the erection of the inflatable medical tent nearby the capsule, are on stage, they're on scene. Again,
Preliminary coordination. 446722.
once again, there are fairly thick clouds and quite a bit of ground fog at the landing site. So the search and recovery forces being very cautious and very deliberate in their disposition of the helicopters that are on scene, and which helicopters will be allowed to land to begin the process of extracting the crew once those helicopters are able to land. And the search and recovery forces now indicating that they should be able to land the first wave of helicopters near the descent module in the typical sequential fashion that those helicopters are instructed to touch down so that the critical personnel can begin the process of approaching the vehicle and extracting the crew. If all is going as planned, the Soyuz is about 2 minutes away from touchdown. We're about a minute away from the anticipated touchdown of the Soyuz vehicle on the steppe of Kazakhstan. We'll be standing by for confirmation from the search and recovery forces as to when the touchdown has occurred and whether the Soyuz has landed upright or has been pulled on its side, which is frequently the case. Soyuz now at an altitude of 300 meters. Landing is imminent.
Transmission in process. Copy you. Not seeing you yet.
Standing by for confirmation of touchdown.
.67 degrees coordinates. Inaudible. You have the coordinates. It's 45, 67, 20. Visibility 500. 45, 67, 20 coordinates. Yes, I monitor.
Once again, we're standing by for official confirmation of touchdown from the search and recovery forces in the area just to the northeast of the town of Arkelik on the steppe of Kazakhstan.
Checking zone 4. .682. Tell the position of the object. We're not observing the object. It's foggy. We cannot see anything. No, we have not found the object yet. Okay.
And the words on the front screen of the Russian Mission Control Center say it all. In Cyrillic, that's the Russian for Jest Posadka, they've landed. Expedition 34 is back home on Earth, landing occurring. We don't have an official touchdown time yet, or an unofficial touchdown time. We'll work on that to get that for you shortly. But Kevin Ford, Oleg Novitsky, and Yevgeny Tarelkin are back home, having landed just a few moments ago on the steppe of Kazakhstan.
Can you hear cosmonauts?
We'll wait to see whether the Soyuz landed upright or on its side. But the more important issue is Soyuz is back on Earth with its 3 crew members.
Inaudible.
Go ahead. Yes, Roman. We have found out that the guys have landed. Excellent. Yes. A little later, we will learn the details. Therefore, I would like to give you a go to reconfigure the COM configuration. Okay, I copy in work. Sounds good. And also, Roman, we need to talk about the results of today's activity. So let's find a good time when you want to do this. Okay, let me finish the reconfig, and then I will call you.
Once again, the Soyuz landed to the northeast of the town of Arkalyk a few moments ago. We're still trying to verify an unofficial touchdown time for you. Communications were quite choppy on the way down, as is typically the case. But the Soyuz landed. That was confirmed by the search and recovery forces. We're waiting for additional information.